Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the festival. Welcome to the workshops we're running here. This is the first of 4 workshops we do in this hotel, and we have 10 workshops downstairs in Hotel St. Gallo. And we're starting this off now, and then there will be quite a lot of events going on. This is for us, my name is Wilfried Rutten, I'm the director of the European Journalism Center. And I'm quite happy to be able to announce this here. This is our 3rd time in Perugia where we run a data workshop, so we're quite happy that this has been made possible. Also, a lot of thanks go to Chris, Francesca, and the organizers here for having us again. I think it will be quite an experience. It's a lot of work. There will be a lot of also dense moments of learning. I've been following stuff last year. Sometimes it gets really difficult, so don't despair when it feels like I've never heard this before. What is he doing there and stuff like this? You will get the hang of it all right. And just kicking this off, I'd like to mention 2 things. One is we're starting a major online course on data journalism in 2 weeks' time, I think on the 17th or 19th of May. If you go to the EJC website, you see the announcement there. We are running it on the Canvas platform, and we have an incredible amount of subscribers. 17,000 people have subscribed to the data school there. So let's see how it works. We don't want to disappoint 17,000 people, obviously. We're on track. We're almost finished with it. It looks good. We're quite proud we made it. So feel invited if you haven't signed up for it yet to sign up for it. It could be quite interesting. And a second thing is I'd like to mention, we have also a session on this later on today. We published a handbook on verification of social media, which you might also find interesting. I think there's some books available here, but it is available online for free on our website. It's about how to verify social media, especially in times of crisis and disasters. It's a handbook, quite modest, but rather nicely done, and also there we get a lot of feedback, and it seems to be very much appreciated in the journalism community that this handbook is out. Having said that, I'll give it on to Liliana Bonegro, who's in the lead on the data journalism for the EJC, and she will introduce the panel and everything else. So thank you, good morning, and see you again.
Good morning, everyone. I'd also like to quickly welcome you to the 3rd edition of the School of Data Journalism. It's quite early in the morning, so it's nice to see so many of you here with us today. We've had the past editions of the school have seen hundreds of journalists sign up. I think we had 200 journalists sign up for the 1st edition 2 years ago, and more than 300 sign up for last year's edition. So it's great to see that there is still interest and see that so many of you are here with us. As Wilfried mentioned, I am leading data journalism activities at the European Journalism Center, and I was also one of the coordinators for the first 2 editions of the school, which is why I am introducing it. So to tell you a few words about this event, the School of Data Journalism is a collaboration between 3 organizations: the Open Knowledge Foundation, the European Journalism Center, and the International Journalism Festival. And we'd like to especially thank the International Journalism Festival this year, and Chris just walked into the room, one of the founders of the festival, for hosting us and for supporting this event, especially given the difficulties that they've had last year in making sure that this event happens. So what does this mean for participants, for all you here today? This event brings together hundreds of journalists, and we think this is the biggest data journalism training event in Europe. So it's the best opportunity that you have to meet and learn together with fellow journalists with similar interests about the latest developments in the field, about the challenges that everyone encounters, but also about new tools and techniques. And we have a program packed with panel discussions and hands-on sessions where you can learn everything from spreadsheets to social media data to investigating crime and corruption, and even collecting your own data with aerial photography. So you'll actually learn how to work with a kite this year, so there's also some fun involved. Before we move into the panel, I'd like to introduce the new coordinators. So this year, the school has 2 new coordinators, and if you signed up for it, you already received some emails from them. These are Antoine Laurent, who is a senior project manager at the EJC. Antoine, maybe you can show yourself to the room, because you'll be seeing Antoine in all the events. Yeah, and the coordinator on the side of the Open Knowledge Foundation is Milena Marin, who is School of Data project manager. So both of them worked hard to bring us all here, and you'll be seeing them in all the events. So if you'll ever have a question, just go and speak to them. I'll now hand over to Milena and Antoine to quickly give you a bit of the logistics for this event, and then we'll get started with the first panel.
Hello, everybody. It's a real honor to be here today, to see so many of you. It's an honor to coordinate this event on behalf of Open Knowledge Foundation and School of Data. It's been a long collaboration. As Liliana said, we've been working together for the past 3 years, every year organizing the School of Data Journalism. I think this year we maybe overdid it a bit. We got ourselves in a bit of trouble by organizing maybe too many workshops. So I think last year we had 4 workshops and we couldn't really select the best one, so we kind of selected everyone. So we'll have 10 workshops, as Liliana said, 4 panel discussions. In the morning, starting 9 a.m. from now till Sunday, we'll have a panel discussion here in this room. And then in the afternoon, we'll move to Hotel Sangalo, where we'll have the workshops. The workshops are, as much as possible, hands-on. We expect quite a lot of people to participate. Bring your laptops. You'll receive an email every evening telling what you need to download, what data, what software we'll use the next day. So pay attention to these emails. We'll let you know what's happening and how you can prepare. We expect internet to be not very reliable, so that's why we really ask you to do these things, to download the data we'll work on and so on. Today, I think we don't have any special requirements. We'll have some workshops with Steve Doig, with Annabelle Church, and with Mariana Santos. We'll be looking already at how to build a data journalism story, how to use maps, and how to do interactive storytelling. So yeah, we're very excited, very passionate about data journalism, very happy to see all of you here. And maybe just in closing, I want to say a couple of words about the Open Knowledge Foundation. For those of you who don't know us, we're a network of global people working, being passionate about data. We do advocacy, we do trainings, we use technology, and we really try to unlock information and make it usable and accessible for everybody. We do a lot of advocacy, as I said, to open up data and information around the world, and we monitor the level of openness. We have an index that looks at how open different countries are, what data sets they release, and so on. We do trainings through the School of Data project that I lead. We work with journalists and activists and really try to teach them the skills they need to be effective in using data. And also we do some services for governments. We help them release data. We build technology tools for them to manage open data and so on. So we'll be here all the time, as Liliana said, and we'll be really happy to answer any questions and talk to you and discover opportunities to collaborate further. Antoine, would you like to say a couple of words about what's happening these days? No. So we'll see Antoine and myself every day from now on. We'll introduce the panel, so I guess you'll have the opportunity to hear him later on. So with this, I'll pass on again the mic to Liliana to kick off the session.
I think this works. So hello again. I'm also your moderator for the opening session of the School of Data Journalism. The title of this session is The Year in Data Journalism, and we organize this session every year in every edition. This is the moment when we review what happened in data journalism for the past year. We look at the key moments, the key developments, the most interesting stories that were published, and discuss opportunities, challenges, and what the future holds. And we have a perfect lineup of speakers to address these questions today. We have some of the best people in the business coming from all corners of the world, everything from South America to North America to Europe and Africa, who are engaged in different forms of using data in support of journalism, from investigative journalism to news storytelling formats and science journalism. So we have, for those of you who've been here for the previous editions of this event, you'll see that we have a mix of old and new faces. We have Aaron Pilhofer, the second to my right, who is a veteran of the School of Data Journalism. He's been with us since the first edition. Aaron is Director of Digital Strategy at the New York Times, where he leads a team of journalists and developers who experiment with new storytelling formats. We also have Guido Romeo, the second to my left, who is an award-winning journalist and science and environment editor at Wired Italy. He is also heavily involved in the open data movement in Italy, and he'll be telling us a bit about some of his successes this year in a bit. Someone that we've always wanted to have on this panel, and we finally managed to this year, is Justin Aronstein, first to my right. Justin is an award-winning journalist and media strategist working to strengthen investigative journalism in Africa. Justin has a lot of different affiliations, so I'm gonna let him mention them, but a few of them. So Justin leads digital innovation at the African Media Initiative. He is also a Knight International Journalism Fellow, and he is also a data journalism advisor to Google. Some of the other new faces on this panel, which we're very, very pleased to have, are Milena Marin, who is also one of the new coordinators of the School of Data Journalism. Milena is a transparency advocate. She is currently program manager for the School of Data at the Open Knowledge Foundation. And previously, she has been a technology coordinator for Transparency International. We're also very pleased to have with us Mariana Santos, who was kind enough to join us on a very short notice. If you looked in the program, you would have seen that Giannina Senini was meant to be with us today. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it on time, but we're really glad that Mariana stepped in and accepted our invitation to be on this panel. Mariana is a Knight International Journalism Fellow working on improving visual and interactive storytelling in Latin American media. She was formerly a member of the interactive team at The Guardian in London, and she is also a former member of the investigative journalism team at La Nación in Costa Rica. And she also has some news for us about new projects that she is starting, so I'm going to let her give you more details about that. So these are our speakers today, and before I hand over to them for the presentations, I just want to quickly tell you the structure of this session. So we will be giving each speaker around 5 minutes to give a short talk. We'll then move into discussion, and we hope to have about 20 minutes for the discussion, and then open the floor for questions from the audience. So with this, I think we can start with the presentations. We haven't really worked out an order. So does anyone want to start, or shall we just decide to start left or right? Yeah. So let's start with right, and let's start with left.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Good. Hi. Sorry, I'm behind this monitor, so you're going to have to. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things very briefly today. I'm not going to talk about any particular projects, although I'm going to show 3 different projects, one of which my team had something to do with, 2 of which my team had nothing to do with, 1 of which is a Guardian project, 2 of which are New York Times. But I'm not showing these projects necessarily because I think they represent, you know, the very best of data journalism, but they represent a particular trend in data journalism that I particularly like and I think is a good trend. So why don't I jump, you know, right in. I'm sure most of, or all of you have seen NSA Files Decoded. This was the Guardian project from last year. It was a fairly epic undertaking, a big reporting project, but it involved a lot of multimedia and a particularly clever use of video.
Sorry to interrupt. Could we have the website up on the screen?
Bing.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've all seen NSA Files Decoded. It's a Guardian project from earlier this year. And what I really loved about it is what I initially thought I was absolutely going to hate, which is video.
Is shocking unto itself, but the content of the document.
So we have a constitution, and it provides that the American people are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures unless there's a warrant. That system in the Constitution has gone seriously off the wheels.
So as you scroll down this piece, you find these sort of interruption. Oh God, I hate Windows.
In the end,
Please God. Oh my God, where's my Macintosh? As you scroll down the piece, you'll notice that you're much like, you know, Snowfall and many of the kind of scrolling article presentations. You'll notice that again, your reading is interrupted with video. It's interrupted with infographics like this, interactives that you can kind of play with. This I like a lot because it brings the data journalism piece into the content. It's an organic whole. It's not 2 separate things. And I think that this is a trend that I really favor because it feels like a single piece of journalism, finally, rather than the story and then the related multimedia, which is the typical way that you see these things presented. This is a project that my team did work on called Monitored Man. In the States anyway, I don't see many of these things in Europe. Maybe these have not become super popular. I don't see anybody here with them. But in the US, you'll see like every other person walking around with like one of these activity monitors on their wrist, like a Nike Fuel or a Fitbit or a thing, and monitoring kind of like how many steps they're taking, how much activity how many calories they're burning. These are really, really popular. And so one of my developers here, Albert's son, and Alistair Dant, yeah, your former boss, who now works at the Times, Albert pitched this as an idea to the science desk that we should be writing about these and telling people like how these things work and which ones are the best. And so he wrote a cover story, just a traditional article, but we wanted to explain to people how these devices actually work. So that's what this interactive does. And as you scroll down, again, you can see the video on the left, or your right, my left, actually showing you what's actually happening as the accelerometer is being triggered. So here's, you can see on the right, this is what's actually being measured in real time by the device. This is one of my favorite ones. Here is not coming up, unfortunately. Here's lifting weights, doing arm curls, or here, one of my favorite ones. Yeah, eating potato chips. But here again, you can see how the video and the data and the infographic all work together in a very organic way to tell the story. It'd be really, really hard to tell this story in a traditional narrative, as a traditional inverted pyramid style article. The guy in this, by the way, is another one of my developers. He's washing dishes, he's riding a bike. You get the idea. Have anybody seen this piece before? Okay, oh, good. I'm glad very few of you have. This piece, I think, is, which my team had nothing to do with. This is the work of our absolutely genius graphics department and some video and our video team. The question here is Ted Ligety, the American giant slalom skier. Why is he so good? Here's an athlete who, in a sport where victory is measured in tenths of a second usually, Ted Ligety is winning races by, in some cases, seconds over some of the top skiers in the world. What is he doing to do this? And so we could have written this as a standard inverted pyramid style narrative, but again, using this sort of scrolly style,
Ted Ligety has been perfecting a unique...
The audio doesn't matter so much. Here you get a sense of what it's like to follow Ted Ligety down this, but the piece that I want to show you is actually down. I would show you the whole thing, but okay, I think this is it. So here, we're showing obviously a lot of slow motion video. Is this the one? Oh, maybe it's not this one. Hang on, bear with me. No, next one, sorry, my bad. So here's the slow motion video of Ted Ligety making a turn, and you can see we're overlaying animation on top of it to show you what actually is happening and what it is about his turning that makes him such a great skier. Now here we've moved into 3D animation to show how he's edging on the uphill ski to begin his turn, and why when he turns faster than anyone else, and how that process actually kind of slingshots him around the gates. But here again, this is an example of how integrating data, graphics, video, it all comes together in a sort of seamless whole. And that's kind of the direction I think in general we need to be thinking about. Data journalism is often considered, for very good reasons, as sort of a specialty of journalism. And I think that's helpful, especially initially when you're trying to build data journalism as a thing, as a discipline, as an idea. But then you get to a point where really data journalism needs to be brought back in, and everybody needs to participate. It's a team sport. You know, here you have infographics, graphic artists, video, Joe Ward, you have reporters involved. Everyone is participating in a piece of journalism that involves data, it involves infographics, but in the end is just simply a piece of journalism. And I think that's a trend that I'd like to see more of. So that's it.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Let's now move on to Justin.
Which one? Do you want to switch sides with me?
No, it's cool. Just do this one. I'll scroll this over.
No, go for it.
How do you launch this?
Good question.
Sorry, another Windows hater. How do you launch?
Play.
Which one is
Where's play? We can't see it.
Presentation play.
here? There we go. Cool.
Saharan's actually given me the perfect setup because I work largely in Africa, which is a really different place in terms of both bandwidth and access and the availability of the raw feedstock that we use to build stories, of data itself. In fact, often we work in a complete vacuum where there's very little digital data available of any type. So I'm currently embedded as an ICFJ Knights International Fellow with an industry association called the Africa Media Initiative, which is a union of 600 plus of the largest media corporations in Africa. And they're actually putting serious money into trying to reinvent themselves because Africa is always roughly 5 years behind the trends up here in the global north. So they've seen this meltdown that's kind of tackled your newsrooms, and it hasn't yet arrived in Africa. Print's still growing, advertising is still healthy. They're only starting to see the very earliest signs of erosion of their business models and their revenue streams. And they've effectively using this lag to try and prepare themselves and leapfrog themselves over the coming disruption and learn for the first time from some of the mistakes you guys have made up here and try and prepare themselves better. So how do we do that? We're trying to fast track what's happened specifically in the US and now increasingly in Europe, where over the last 7 years, you've almost built a completely new ecosystem of news technologists or newsroom technologists who not just use data, but build better engagement tools. Where's enter on this thing? So over the last 2.5 years, we've run a digital innovation program and pumped for Africa fairly serious money into trying to build a diversified, almost pipeline of people, skills, and projects. And we've currently got about 94 active data-driven projects across the continent, either that we're funding or that we've partnered with and giving technical support. They range from everything from newsroom-deployed drones in kind of really rural areas to fact-checking, accessing information, and then normal kind of traditional kind of data visualization and data tool kind of projects in newsrooms. But in addition to that, we've actually built news labs in 4 countries. Those red dots that you see there, they're considered to be hub or influential technology leaders in their regions: South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria. And we're about to roll out another 5 in additional countries. And these are labs that are modeled on hybrids of what's happened with a lot of night partners in the US and some of the pioneering work that The Guardian and the New York Times and others have done, but have also stolen from programs that Mozilla Open Nights and others run. So, for example, embedding fellows into newsrooms to try and help rewire them from the inside. So the past 2.5 years has been spent on building experiments, building catalyst kind of laboratories where we can test at zero cost some of the ideas, or zero cost for the newsrooms at least, and then also building a continental community of enthusiasts who, of their own, get a meet up through Hacks and Hackers chapters in 16 countries. I think we've just lost the slides. Over 16 countries, we've got roughly 30,000 people who are actively involved in hackathons, activities, and collaborative projects at the moment across the continent. These people have now started producing some of the first signs that we can start building revenue models on top of early data tools. But they're very different. They're very different from what we're seeing in Aaron's newsroom or in other similar newsrooms. Could we get the slides back, tech guys? Thanks. Initially, the things that are different are that, as I said, there's very little available data. And even in newsrooms, archives where we're lucky and they haven't yet been trashed, going back 100 years, are still largely in dead wood format, paper. So a lot of the initiative over the last 2 to 3 years has been digitizing those records and then turning them into structured data that we can do stuff with. And that means everything from the very simple thing of just scanning it, scraping it, and then turning them into databases and building APIs on them. But because there's so little data, media have realized that there's a vacuum. Anyone who wants to build any kind of app, from a tourism app to a recipe advice app, needs content. And suddenly they're turning to the media now as the provider of that content. So you can start building metered paywalls. You can start building revenue share models on top of that. And it's not just media archives. The media are now going into universities and other kinds of data and information curators and are helping them digitize, and then are starting to build things like entity databases, where the initial information and documents are all free, but you build a value-added business model around entity tracking and entity mapping. The kind of thing that Open Calais does for you up here in the north, that Thomson Reuters and others build. Suddenly media in the south, where this information is a premium, can start charging for that. They're also building data stores. What do they do with this as news projects? So bringing it back to newsrooms is the very early first examples. We're building simple news tools. So you run a national story. This is an example from Kenya that costs $250 to build, that tracks royalties from mining companies. And it accompanied a story on television where they reported on royalties were being paid across by mining companies to the government, but government was not actually using the money. The money was lying and, in a suspense account, completely unused. Communities who watched the story and got outraged could go and put their village name in and then find out exactly how much their village was supposed to have been paid and what that money was supposed to have achieved in terms of building schools, bridges, and so forth. and then provided them with mobilization tools so that villagers could connect with each other and then start petitioning or campaigning politicians. All of that was driven by very simple spreadsheets on the back end. And importantly, the website was effectively just a shop front. The entire project actually ran on SMS. So you're building data journalism tools that are queried and accessible by SMS clients. The newsrooms are then able to monetize that because they charge premium SMS rates and they do a revenue share with the carrier. So suddenly it's a project that pays for itself. Audiences are also more attuned to paying for things on mobile, where web is everything is free. On mobile, they're used to actually having to pay for access. So there's virtually no hurdle of entry. This is a similar example from Kenya around elections. They did a big story about how wards were being manipulated in the run-up to last year's elections, which were very contested in Kenya, and then giving people tools to check where they were registered, if they were registered, where they had to register, and whether their registrations were correct for polling. That tool, which cost $500 to build, has now this month been adopted by the government of Malawi as the official government solution for voter registration and voter verification. So it's an example of a newsroom tool that suddenly grows into something far bigger. It's also been redeployed by newsrooms in Zimbabwe and in Cameroon at very, very low cost, and again, on the back end, running simply off spreadsheets. The primary interface, again, is SMS or USSD, which is one level below SMS. This is another example from Kenya, and the reason why I'm showing it is that this is the first substantive, coherent revenue model that is data-driven that we've helped pioneer. It's now going to be replicated in South Africa and Nigeria as well. And what our media newsroom clients have been doing is they've gone out and they've asked their audiences, where are your major pain points? What are the issues that keep you awake at night that you need more information on to be able to take life decisions? And the answers in most of the markets that we operate in have been health, education, and some of the other bread and butter issues like access to services. This is an example around healthcare. The very first thing at the top there is it's in terms of web technology, not great, but in terms of impact, fairly large. There's a problem with dodgy or fake doctors in Kenya. So you go and see, and I've personally experienced it, I've got ill in Kenya, I've gone to see a doctor, I've been given medication and what I thought was treatment, I've got even sicker, flown away to another country and gone to my normal GP. And when they tried to access the file from the Kenyan doctor, the secretary told my doctor's secretary, no, this guy that you're trying to get a file from is actually a veterinarian. He's not a doctor. He's qualified, but he's not qualified for human treatment. So, and this is apparently a common problem in Kenya. So a simple tool that is, again, run off a spreadsheet and queried by SMS, we scraped all the data of registered doctors, doctors with malpractice action against them, doctors with criminal records against them, and then turned that into a query tool that while you're sitting in the waiting room of a doctor, you can input the name, and it'll then send you text message info back saying, he's actually a dentist and you're about to have a kidney operation with him, you might want to think again, or similar kinds of advice. We've done the same for health insurance on this one, for your nearest medical facilities. We're doing malaria tools and so forth. Again, primary interface SMS, and the newsroom monetizes that by charging premium SMS rates. So they get a 50% share from the carrier. They had, during the trial, 85,000 unique visitors per week, which translates into real meaningful money in an African kind of context. We're seeing similar experiments now using the same kind of approach around realty data, around legal data, around all kinds of stories and news tools that are originally used to illustrate or to augment a traditional news reporting story and then grow into an evergreen resource that you can use as a value-added data service for readers, or for audiences at least. So those are some of the trends that we have seen. We're also seeing our first experiments with the Internet of Things, but again, that they play out slightly differently to what we heard from Aaron, where in the US, a lot of the Internet of Things is around personal data. We're helping fund our first experiment around sensors in water that give people real-time feedback on whether the water that they're drawing from rivers is contaminated and is going to make them sick at all or not. And that generates data that journalists can then analyze to do trend reporting. How do we fund all of this stuff? We've got a series of innovation funds. This year we're launching, again, the annual $1 million challenge, which is based on the Night News Challenge, and that launches later this month. And we aggressively reach out to Europeans and Americans to partner with African media to help kind of drive some of these experiments. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Dustin. We'll now move on to Mariana.
Hello, good morning. My name is Mariana Santos, and I come here to represent a bit the scenery, well, in the name of Janina Segnini, which was my former boss at La Nación, Costa Rica, to tell you about a bit about the scenery of data journalism in South America. So this comes out of a personal path, I would say. So I'm Portuguese, actually. Then I worked at The Guardian for the last 3 years with Alistair, who's done the project Aaron just showed about the bit fit. And Alistair introduced me to newsrooms and to data journalism and data visualization especially. I'm a communication designer that started working in journalism to visualize data, to tell stories in a more visual way, to give access to users to data that they wouldn't otherwise maybe be able to explore effectively. So after this path, I learned a lot, and then I was invited by the International Center for Journalism to join Latin America newsroom as a base, and then develop a project with many other newsrooms across the region. They asked me to think about what would be my main goals, and after studying a bit the scenery, I realized that first, Latin America has an amazing visual heritage, as we know, music, colors, like lots of artistic path, but they don't use it in their journalism. They do exactly what Aaron was telling that we should stop doing, which is a text and then maybe an image or a video attached that are not immersed and do not tell the story in a fluid way. So my two projects, one was connect artists or designers with journalists. The scenery right now is like, you have a newsroom. Well, there are exceptions, and we have here Mommy from La Nación in Buenos Aires, which are an exception. But usually the newsrooms are divided by journalists in one side, which are mainly focused on print. They still, like, it hasn't, like in London, for instance, at The Guardian, we are printing less and less and less. We are digital first, we are mobile first, actually. In Latin America, the print is still very strong, and the mindset of we have to have journalists working together with designers and developers is not written in stone yet, and some managerial levels do not see that as a go-to future. So my two projects was, okay, let's try to do multitasking newsrooms, trying to combine journalists, developers, and designers to tell stories. Of course, always with the aim and the goal of let's do a snowfall like the New York Times, or let's do like these visual stories that are immersed, such as the one Aaron just showed. But they say, okay, this is our dream, and mostly designers and some journalists want to do that, but they reject it right away from day one because they say, okay, this is amazing, but just Americans and Europeans can do it. We don't have access to this technology. And wait a minute, technology, internet is for everybody. Everybody can write HTML or JavaScript if they want, if they learn. They just don't know what's the process. And it's interesting that for us, I say for us here in Europe or United States, we have a doubt, we Google. We kind of know if we don't get it right at the first try, we search other words. This mindset is not in place in most of the newsrooms in Latin America. First, some of them do not speak English very fluently, so how do they know that the word scraping exists and what is scraping? So I must say high five to International Center for Journalists. This year they chose a strategy which was to pick 4 fellows, like as Justin, we are 4 fellows, but we are all based in the same region. So we have Mariano Blechman. He launched Hacks and Hackers Buenos Aires, and it's the second biggest media party in the world after New York. And he has been pushing the boundaries of data journalism and visual storytelling on Latin America, inviting key people from all around the world who are doing great projects explaining the process, telling how they do it. And then, apart from that, he launched a recent project called Media Factory, which is browsing across the entire Latin America persons that want to start a newsroom of the future. So people apply. You can be a designer, developer, or journalist, or illustrator, and they apply. And then he brings them together in Buenos Aires, and he mentors and trains with people such as them to train how to do it. Because once you know the process, you are able to replicate it, to copy, and to reuse it and do it your way. So thinking about that, I created a project. It's my second line of project. It's called Chicas Poderosas, and it means powerful women, but it's not only for women, it's for men and women. What happened and what we saw happening often at Hacks and Hackers events, not only in Buenos Aires, there is another one in Chile, run by another fellow called Miguel Paz, who did as well Poderopedia, a project that wants to map relationships between business people and politicians to try to fight and point out corruption, misleading information, money badly spent, etc. And seeing that Hacks and Hackers was very effective to combine journalists and developers, we had like 95% of men attending and 5% or less of women attending. So I really wanted to target that specific point. Especially in my team, I was the only girl with other developers and journalists. I'm not complaining. I really enjoyed it. They took very well care of me. But I felt the need. Women need to be more engaged. I was yesterday talking to Annabelle. In a team of 180 developers at one point, we were at The Guardian. We were 4 girls. And this is not significant at all. So how can we try to bring more women into newsrooms in technology? This is a very big topic in top-level companies such as Twitter or Facebook, etc. But we have to do something to address it. In Latin America, the majority of investigative journalists are women, but they do not get involved in technology because they just reject it. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to get involved. I let that to the developers. Okay, and then the developers would be in another building. So they do the investigation, they have the databases, and then they send it to another building and say, please do something interactive. This is how it worked in many newsrooms that I've visited. So along this year, I've worked a month project in different newsrooms in Latin America, trying to combine them. And this factor that they send someone international, someone that is not from their country, really lets the managerial levels open up and say, okay, let's try what these folks have to say. And that factor, they call it the gringo factor. Despite the fact I'm not American, they call me gringo, and I don't mind as long as they let me do stuff. And really, after the projects, the teams would say, well, we never worked together, this is amazing, like, we really have to trust each other. And then they start implementing that. And this happened in Chile, in Colombia, in Mexico, in Venezuela, and other countries, in Costa Rica. But I wanted to just point out one little thing, is that Latin America, the same a bit like in Africa, things don't move as fast as here. They are a little bit behind, but they are extremely starving for catching up. And they don't have access to the same stuff we do. For instance, in Venezuela, me and Miguel Paz and Alistair, we ran a hackathon on trying to teach some of free tools there is to do visual storytelling, just to get people immersed and explain. You don't need to know by heart HTML or JavaScript. You need to know what JavaScript allows you to do, what kind of technology you use to do a parallax site like the one Aaron just showed. Just open up. This is how you do it. And then they can develop and search for more information. And then in Venezuela, after 3 days of investigation, cleaning up the data, arranging everything to start doing a story, at the last day, we had the stories completed, and this journalist said, you know, if I would publish this president would go, or this guy from the government, he would be arrested. But you know what? I cannot publish this, otherwise I will be killed like that, or my family would be killed. This is like very terrifying, and after you work so much and trying to train people, then they just have their hands tied because they cannot publish. So, okay, my news is that I just applied for a new fellowship, the Stanford Fellowship, the Knight Stanford Fellowship, and my project is exactly this. is to keep going a bit with the Chicas Poderosas, because I see this, because women in Latin America are, how to say, they impulse the journalism. They are the driving forces of most of journalistic newsrooms. My former boss, Janina Segnini, is an example. She launched and she ran the investigative team of La Nación. For 5 years, she had the freedom of publish stuff that would actually be very sensible as a newspaper in this political context. The same with Mommy at La Nación in Buenos Aires. They strive and they don't quit, never, even if the government forbids every advertiser to publish in the newspaper, making the newspaper really fragile, not having money. They're still going and they're still finding other ways to go. And I think this is amazing, because these girls are really powerful girls and they don't quit because of the social contest. And you see that across the entire Latin America. It's amazing. And I thought I would like to go back to London after my fellowship, but seeing these people like giving literally their life to open data, to address corruption, address narco-traffic, address paramilitary problems like in Colombia, address feminicide in Mexico, which is assassination of women, especially if they are pregnant. This is a movement that they have pink buses just for women to travel, because if you go, the girls or women go in a normal bus, they can get raped or murdered. The situation is very bad in most rural areas, and I think data journalism really will push the boundaries forward and will help fight this corruption. And overall, I expect it to make the context a bit better. And I must say, a high five again to ICFJ with the sponsorship of Night, that they have been really targeting these issues, and you can really see improvements year after year. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mariana. Great, let's move on to the last two presentations. And guys, we're trying to wrap up the presentations in like 7 or 8 minutes. Just so
Okay, I'll be short. I'll be short, promise. Okay, I guess I'm one of the old faces here. Liliana was mentioning this is probably my third year on the panel. I'm data editor at Wired Italy magazine. So actually, Liliana was saying I was science, and that was what I was doing when I first got into Wired in 2010. But my work evolved with when I started doing data stories, and it's been a very happy choice, because it has coincided with the say opening and growth of data journalism in Italy. When we started doing this kind of stuff in 2010, 2009, it was kind of data what? It's like, oh, you're talking about open data, aren't you? It's like, so it's now it's growing. If you simply look at the Italian entries, Italian application to the data journalism award, I guess 2 years ago it was like 2 entries. Now it's in the order of more than 10 probably. And I think the most interesting sign is that big outlets, and Wired is not a big outlet, but I'm talking about La Stampa and La Repubblica, are looking at this field and are trying to invest. La Stampa especially, you must give this to them. They have started what they call La Stampa Academy. That's a community of more than 1,000 people, and which also invited me to have a couple of lectures there. And that's sort of their how would you call it? Their young teams selection. So it's a community of people they look at and they cultivate, and they've been awarding grants to develop projects. So it's a way of bringing new blood into the newsroom, and hopefully this will prove very effective. They just awarded 3 4,500 grand it was 3 grants for I think in the order of 3,000 or 4,000 euro each last month, and so this is a smart way of sort of getting the ball started. That said, not everything is happy in Italy as far as data journalism. I mean, we still think of ourselves as South Americans, probably, because we always say, oh, data journalism is what the Americans and the Northern Europeans do. You know, it's always somebody more north or more to the west who's doing the good stuff. But what is really happening is that freelancers are the ones actually investing in this, and with all the problems of freelancers, I mean, they have little resources, they have to manage time, and of course they don't have a newsroom to back them up. I've been a freelancer myself for 8 years, and I know what are the hurdles there. Another problem is what Aaron was talking about, was touching upon the specialty complex. Coming from a science journalism background, I know that ghettos are not a healthy thing for journalism and for good stories. And so I'm struggling myself to keep data journalism out of say, the ghetto thing. And that's probably why I'm doing very little science stories, data based science stories, and we're doing more like politics or like society stories. Actually, our last big story was on the private donations, all the private and public donations to Italian political parties in the last 20 years, and it was kind of, you know, a crazy idea, and we ended up basically unlocking the data for all the private donations for the last 20 years and putting them online. And of course, it was something that we thought was much easier than what it actually took. The last point that I want to touch upon is the access to information and access to data. As many of you probably know, and I hope all of you know, all of the Italians at least know, we don't have a FOIA, we don't have a Freedom of Information Act in Italy. We started, when I say we, it's not Wired, but I'm changing hats now. It's Diritto di Sapere and a couple of other organizations. Diritto di Sapere is an association I started 2 years ago together with Andrea Menapace and Helen Derbyshire, who are also at this festival. And we're campaigning for an Italian Freedom of Information Act. The news is that we may get something done by the end of this year. It's a pretty unique moment in the history of Italy, because for the first time we have a prime minister who is actually talking about open data and access to information, and he's actually writing, I mean, he's signing off law projects that involve these things. If this happens, it won't be like heaven, but it will be a great push forward for data journalism. When Justin says, shows scanned copies of documents and things like that, that's exactly what we're dealing with. When I did the project on private donations to political parties, what the data was technically open, because you just go up to the room of representatives, the Chamber of Representatives, and ask for the data. They give it to you, but it's like a 1,600-page PDF, and go and churn that out into a CSV or whatever format you can machine read. Of course, this is not a very clean process. The other point I wanted to touch upon, and this is maybe the more nerdy but the more dramatic part, is that we have a huge data problem. The quality of data from our public institution is still very bad. For instance, I wrap up. It says wrap up.
Very transparent.
Yeah, I'm totally transparent. So we got a very poor quality of data. Just to mention one example, this week I discovered that the dates on the dating on parliamentary documentation is different for the Senate and the room of and the Chamber of Representatives, and sometimes you also have the voting date, which is earlier than the discussion date. So apparently they vote things before they discuss them. If you were to go with the paper, with the with the paper copy of the documents. So there is a lot of progress done in Italy. There is surely much more progress to do.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Guido. Let's move on to Milena.
I promise I'll be super short. So I just wanted to talk a bit about our project School of Data and tell you a bit about the challenges we face. So that's the angle I come at this panel, educating people to use data. We run a project called School of Data. We're an international network of data trainers. As I said before, we work a lot with journalists, with activists around the world, and our mission is really to empower them to use data effectively. And we do that through a mix of things. We run lots of trainings around the world. We work a lot in Latin America, in Africa, a bit in Europe. We create communities, so we're trying as much as possible to localize our training efforts, and as well do online courses and materials on schoolofdata.org. Now, of course, the biggest challenge we faced is that while trainings are amazing and they are very powerful in inspiring people, in showing people what's possible, and what they can do with data, they're really not enough. I really, honestly, with all my heart, think that data journalism is not hard, but you can't go from zero to hero in a week's training, let's be honest. So the hard part we're facing is making these trainings really sustainable and making them work on a long term, and really providing a community of support to trainees. So what do people do after trainings when they will start their first data journalism project and they will get the first error in a spreadsheet, or data will be extremely messy and they won't manage to clean it? They might just quit. And they might just say, you know what, this is not for me. So instead of that, what we want to do is create communities of support. We want to get lots of people in different countries that can help these people that face difficulties. It doesn't have to be us, of course. It's just about connecting all the people that provide these training opportunities. And Mariana already talked about Chicas Poderosas, Hacks and Hackers was mentioned, all sorts of Fab Lab communities and things like this around the world. So I think really the secret is putting these communities together, creating a support system, getting learners and beginners in data journalism a place, a safe place to ask questions, to debate, to work with others, to get the support they need. So that's very much the angle I'm coming from. Very, very interested in how people learn data journalism skills, what gets them motivated, what is impact in data training. So I don't want to take too much time, because I know we want to hear lots of your questions, and you'll be seeing lots of me, as I said, in the next 3-4 days. So I think we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk. But remember, there are communities, there are people who can support you in your data journalism efforts. There are many in Italy as well. We've been working with Open Knowledge Foundation Italy. We've also been running a couple of events here under School of Data. We had a workshop back in December in Trento, we had a data expedition in Bologna, and hopefully this community is growing as well in Italy, and would be very happy to support it. So yeah, without further ado, I'll pass on to Liliana again. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Milena, and thank you everyone for their wonderful presentations. I think everyone deserves a big round of applause. So we have around 20 minutes for discussions and taking questions from the audience. I really loved everyone's talks. You've made some interesting and really key points, and I'd like to follow up on some of them in this discussion. I love the fact that Aaron pointed out good trends in data journalism, so what should we be working towards, which is a better integration of data journalism techniques and presentation formats within any genre of journalism, from investigative journalism to sports reporting. I love to hear that Africa is doing really well and is borrowing from innovation in all kinds of other parts of the world, and working with some limitations, a lot of limitations, including lack of data, but still managing to do incredible progress and even get as far as actually having revenues out of data journalism, which is a question that that concerns all media outlets around the world. In Latin America, we've seen, again, the same problem that Aaron pointed out, that Latin American media doesn't connect textual storytelling with visual formats, with some exceptions that were mentioned, like La Nación in Argentina, and Mariana also pointed out the gender issue. So how can we try to bring more women into technology and into data journalism? We've also seen that in Italy, the situation is more similar to Latin America, but we've seen that only big media outlets are investing in
Investing is a big word.
trying to integrate data in their reporting efforts, but we're also seeing a bottom-up movement. We're also seeing freelancers being interested in these techniques. And we've also heard about the struggles of trying to do data journalism in a country without the Freedom of Information Act. And Milena pointed out that one way to work together and learn is through communities of support, so creating communities of people who can help each other. And in a sense, this is the point of this whole event, of the School of Data Journalism. So I think I'll have to prioritize. So there are a few things that I'd really like to hear other people's thoughts about, other people on the panel. So maybe let's start with two things. So in terms of good trends in data journalism. So what should we be focusing on in the future? It's hard not to bring up the latest controversy in this field. Some of you may be familiar in the past months have seen the launch of some new data journalism ventures, such as the New York Times launched the Upshot, a website dedicated to data journalism. Trinity Mirror in the UK launched AMP P3D, another data-driven storytelling site. We've seen Nate Silver relaunch his 538 blog and describing his work as data journalism, and we also have Vox on the side of explanatory journalism. So in a sense, it seems to me that we're seeing quite the opposite of what Aaron was suggesting, which is moving data journalism techniques and practices into a separate publication, into a separate unit. And these cases have been really, really highly mediatized. So I'd like to hear the thoughts, your thoughts on these new developments, and and what how data journalism should look like. Who would like to give it a shot?
All right, well,
So the raging debate about all of these sites is, what are they? And to some degree, I've always felt it doesn't really matter. You know, they call it data journalism. Nate Silver, who is brilliant, did not invent data journalism, but he did certainly bring it into much more the mainstream in US newsrooms than it ever had been before. So I guess while there's a lot of talk about data journalism now in some very new quarters of US newsrooms, I would say it really, in the end, doesn't much matter. You know, there's a saying, it's like, you know, any publicity you get, good or bad, is still publicity, so who cares, you know, just spell my name right. And that's kind of how I feel, about it. If they want to call it data journalism, let them call it data journalism. I just think it's great that we're having conversations in newsrooms, you know, people who, the stodgiest old school print editors now sort of recognize that, oh my God, using data as a source, which fundamentally is what data journalism is all about. The data piece, you know, people talk a lot about data journalism, and there's a lot of, you know, the tendency is to sort of fall in love with your tools and talk a lot about data and very little about journalism. That is a trend that we need to kind of move away from and remember that this is about storytelling. But using data as a source can be expressed in many ways. It can end up being the kind of video-driven things I was showing. It can be a chart, it can be a graph, it can be a written narrative, it can be traditional computer-assisted reporting. There are many flavors of it. All I care about is that we are now having a broader conversation about data journalism, and I think that's just, in the end, a very good thing.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to have a go at this question?
Well, in Italy, as you understood, we're in a totally different position from the US, and we don't have the big investments Nate Silvers and others have seen on their projects. But we totally need to keep it simple. I agree with Aaron. Data journalism is just another fancy word. I mean, at the end of the day, what matters is the impact you have, and if your product costs more than what you actually bring home to the company, because that will, in the long run, it will determine your survival as a journalist, as an outlet, and so on. I'm doing, well, at least, or maybe more than my work now is onto digital or digital first or whatever they call it. Digital first, I mean, you can have the same discussion about digital first, basically. It's the same phenomenon. I mean, we're journalists, come on, we know, we work with words, so we know the tricks that if we say data journalism, I mean, it's just that we need another buzzword to hang ourselves on. I grew up with working in daily papers. I mean, and I'm meaning paper. So, and in Italy we call them fish wraps because today it's a daily paper, it's news, and tomorrow you wrap the fish with it. So keep it humble and stay simple, really.
Great. Does anyone else want to have a go at it?
Just very quickly, some and most of the newsrooms in Latin America do not have money and resources to have a journalist and designer and developer to work specifically with data. So these kind of companies are like a recurring trend on people that are a little bit ahead in the skill set, and they think, why do not create a company that grabs the data for you, like this very, very dense big data we're talking, not because data is everything, like Aaron said, is pictures, video, it's like journalism has been all the time, but now we are recurring to this big data that has been registered. And for those data analysts, people that know how to work with spreadsheets, etc., this is like a specific topic that is not broadly spread across Latin American newsrooms. So most of the times they say, we don't have the resources to have in-house all of these skill sets. So these small teams of specialized freelancers start doing like, okay, we can grab the data for you, we can do the investigation, we can do the storytelling, we can put the entire piece for you, or we can do just a piece of cleaning the data for you and then you write the story. So this is like a topic that has been currently posted because of the lack of resources and the need of skill set.
Thank you. So indeed, it seems like establishing data journalism startups is a way in which Europe is also dealing with the lack of in-house skills. Maybe Justin, would you like to tell us how newsrooms in Africa are dealing with the lack of skills? And I think you've mentioned some of the things in your presentation already.
Yes, I mean, obviously skills are a major problem. The reality is that a lot of African media is terrible. The content, just normal, traditional content, is poorly produced. And the data and multimedia skills, the kind of integrated, deep engagement reporting and product that we see at the New York Times and elsewhere is impossible in these kinds of newsrooms. So they need to prioritize. And building an outside pipeline of independent producers is essential in that kind of ecosystem. So it's not a cost that the newsroom carries, it's something they can tap into for specific projects. And we're seeing a lot of that developing. So people who've acquired these skills are starting to gravitate into, I wouldn't call them startups because they're not a Silicon Valley kind of startup, but they've become freelance collectives or associations, maybe similar to Journalism Plus Plus here in Europe, who are able to work around specific projects, not just in terms of producing product, but also securing funding and resources to power those products. We run this thing called Code for Africa, which sounds similar to Code for America, but it's not. Code for America kind of helps government be more efficient. In my world, governments are often the problem. You don't want them to be efficient. So it's almost trying to rebalance that by give citizens tools. And Code for South Africa, which is one of these newsroom-focused data labs that we've built, is now actually cash positive. It produces enough paying work that they're hiring staff and they've got excess in their budgets. So there is a business model there. Once that gets mainstreamed into newsrooms, I think the dynamic will change dramatically because then suddenly your overhead costs build. And that's why we're focusing right at the beginning on trying to explore kind of alternative revenue streams that are not advertising based. If we don't do that, the marketing and the kind of revenue departments of the newspapers will, and they'll effectively bastardize our work. So let's rather play with some of those kind of models ourselves.
Thank you, Justin. So Justin kind of opened up the path for discussing the business models question, which is a key question. But we've discussed this in the previous editions, and we have Mariana here who brought up a new issue, which is the gender issue in data journalism. So I think I'll go for that one as the last discussion point before moving on to opening the floor for questions to the audience. And this is, again, particularly important now when we've seen the launches of these several ventures that describe themselves as data journalism, and they've been a lot of limitations have been pointed out, and one of them is the fact that they are male dominated. So in a sense, it seems that data journalism is reinforcing gender issues present both in journalism but also in technology. So I'd like to ask the panel whether you think that's the case and what do you think can be done about this?
May I start?
Please.
Okay, may I start? So I think it's an issue in newsrooms in terms of technology. But actually, in terms of journalistic, no, it's very dominated by women in Latin America, lots of girl power, but the involvement with technology of these girls is very, very limited. So that's why running projects like the School of Data, and in specific the project I run called Chicas Poderosas, it's basically bringing experts such as Aaron and people from the School of Data that are doing this work in the field every day, and they are proving cases of success, such as visual storytelling or data scraping, investigation like Janina Segnini. She's been in all Chicas Poderosas teaching journalists where to get your data, how to scrape, which tools to use. But from point one, most of the journalists, I must say, do not know how to manage a spreadsheet. an Excel spreadsheet. So actually we start there, and we do not just start how to clean the data, we start from the very beginning. And people are really, really interested, they are keen to grab it, and then from these small training sessions, they keep on going. So we are really trying to touch that point and bring more women into immersed newsrooms inside technology.
Yeah, thanks, Mariana. Yeah, go ahead, Milano.
Just as well from my experience in training, I think people sometimes just need a very small push at the beginning. There's a big fear of technology for some reason, and it really comes from these errors that keep coming and coming and coming in our spreadsheets and in our tools. But I think it's often as easy as showing people what is possible. So we've had many trainings in which people literally cried of happiness when we showed them that something is possible. Maybe they've been working, you know, in a very hard way that they discovered themselves, so nobody showed them the right tool for the right data set they were struggling with. And when they saw that something is possible maybe in 5 minutes, something that previously took them days, months, weeks, whatever, they were crying of tears. So I think that's our mission, is showing people what's possible. And it's happening with girls as much as with men. It's not necessarily about girls, but I think we need to give that push. And on a positive note, in my trainings, especially trainings on youth, I have to say that participation from women is higher than from men. So I think maybe there's this world of technology is dominated by men, but in the more traditional, you know, like the old school people, but those who are coming now, I think there's more equality, there's more representation from both genders. At least that's what I observe in my training. So maybe just to end a bit in a positive note, this discussion.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Milena, for ending it on a positive note. So we really only have a few minutes. So I think we only have time for one question from the audience. So who would like to ask the panel a question and just tell us your name and wait for the microphone? Maybe just raise your hand if someone has a question for us. Yeah, the pressure is high. It's one question, so it has to be good.
Well, maybe two, come on.
Sorry, I'm not sure my question will be that good. I'm a journalist from Australia, and I finished journalism school last year and the year before. And data journalism was never mentioned. We never had a single session on Excel or anything like that. I'm wondering what can be done about that problem, considering in Australia all the journalists come from journalism schools.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to have someone from Australia here. So, yeah, Milena, would you like to?
I think so. Indeed, I think there's a bit of a lack in formal education of data journalism. I think there are some master programs around the world. I think lots of them in the States, few of them in Europe. I think the Netherlands, UK, Spain are pioneering this kind of formal education in data journalism. But I think what's happening more and more is informal education around that. So programs such as School of Data, such as Chicas Poderosas, Hacks and Hackers, and all these communities who organize informal trainings, who provide informal accreditation. So it's not as good as having a diploma from a school, but it gives you the skills you need. So what I would encourage you to do is check out what are the communities in your area who do that. And you'd be surprised, there are, I don't know, mapping parties in the evening teaching you how to use maps, or I don't know, security trainings, or all sorts of things. So if you don't find it in the formal world, go to the informal places. You'll find amazing communities really ready to support you in doing that.
Yeah, Aaron would like to add something really quickly.
Two quick things. So I was just in Australia last year, and I had such a great time, and I was absolutely blown away by how little progress had been made within major mainstream media organizations when it comes to data journalism. There are like 2 people doing it. So it's not just a problem at the academic level, it's clearly a problem at the news level, but you can look at that as a problem or an opportunity. You know, if data journalism is not being done where you are, there are, as everyone here has said, I mean, there is stuff going around the world. There are amazing resources. Everyone up here, I think, is pretty much self-taught, including me. I wasn't even a journalism major. I was a history major. Wasn't a lot of data involved there either. But you can look at this as an opportunity. You know, if it's not being done where you are, it's like a time machine. You can walk into a box and look at what's going on in the UK. I would wager that most of the stories that newsrooms have done in the UK, US, Africa, and Europe, you could probably do in Australia, and suddenly you're a magician, right? And so the problem is convincing an editor to give you the time to do it. But I think it's also, you know, yeah, you're right. It kind of sucks, but it's also a huge opportunity.
Can I add one thing?
Really quickly, before we're being kicked out.
Aaron, I'm a witness on this. So Aaron just said the very same thing 2 years ago. Instead of Australia, he said Italy at the very same question. So it works. Just follow the lead.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Guido. So I think we have to wrap up here before we're being kicked out. So I really like to thank everyone for joining us for this session, and please join me in giving a big thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for me.
We needed a day to make it really work. We needed a day to get questions enough from the public.
No, that's pretty good. The questions are always interesting. Yeah.
Until
I'm flying out on Monday.
Monday. Wow. So you're really gonna.
I actually got an invite last year, and nobody's doing it. Another conference. Every year, I wish.
It's incredible.
Program is great. So much of this is kind of the agenda set by American. I knew that.
Antoine and myself every day from now on will introduce the panel, so I guess you'll have the opportunity to hear him later on. So with this, I'll pass on again the mic to Liliana to kick off the session.
I think this works. So hello again. I'm also your moderator for the opening session of the School of Data Journalism. The title of this session is The Year in Data Journalism, and we organize this session every year in every edition. This is the moment when we review what happened in data journalism for the past year. We look at the key moments, the key developments, the most interesting stories that were published, and discuss opportunities, challenges, and what the future holds. And we have a perfect lineup of speakers to address these questions today. We have some of the best people in the business coming from all corners of the world, everything from South America to North America to Europe and Africa, who are engaged in different forms of using data in support of journalism, from investigative journalism to news storytelling formats and science journalism. So we have, for those of you who've been here for the previous editions of this event, you'll see that we have a mix of old and new faces. We have Aaron Pilhofer, the second to my right, who is a veteran of the School of Data Journalism. He's been with us since the first edition. Aaron is Director of Digital Strategy at the New York Times, where he leads a team of journalists and developers who experiment with new storytelling formats. We also have Guido Romeo, the second to my left, who is an award-winning journalist and science and environment editor at Wired Italy. He is also heavily involved in the open data movement in Italy, and he'll be
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the festival. Welcome to the workshops we're running here. This is the first of 4 workshops we do in this hotel, and we have 10 workshops downstairs in Hotel St. Gallo. And we're starting this off now, and then there will be quite a lot of events going on. This is for us, my name is Wilfried Rutten, I'm the director of the European Journalism Center. And I'm quite happy to be able to announce this here. This is our 3rd time in Perugia where we run a data workshop, so we're quite happy that this has been made possible. Also, a lot of thanks go to Chris, Francesca, and the organizers here for having us again. I think it will be quite an experience. It's a lot of work. There will be a lot of also dense moments of learning. I've been following stuff last year. Sometimes it gets really difficult, so don't despair when it feels like I've never heard this before. What is he doing there and stuff like this? You will get the hang of it all right. And just kicking this off, I'd like to mention 2 things. One is we're starting a major online course on data journalism in 2 weeks' time, I think on the 17th or 19th of May. If you go to the EJC website, you see the announcement there. We are running it on the Canvas platform, and we have an incredible amount of subscribers. 17,000 people have subscribed to the data school there. So let's see how it works. We don't want to disappoint 17,000 people, obviously. We're on track. We're almost finished with it. It looks good. We're quite proud we made it. So feel invited if you haven't signed up for it yet to sign up for it. It could be quite interesting. And a second thing is I'd like to mention, we have also a session on this later on today. We published a handbook on verification of social media, which you might also find interesting. I think there's some books available here, but it is available online for free on our website. It's about how to verify social media, especially in times of crisis and disasters. It's a handbook, quite modest, but rather nicely done, and also there we get a lot of feedback, and it seems to be very much appreciated in the journalism community that this handbook is out. Having said that, I give it on to Liliana Bonegro, who's in the lead on the data journalism for the EJC, and she will introduce the panel and everything else. So thank you, good morning, and see you again.
Good morning, everyone. I'd also like to quickly welcome you to the 3rd edition of the School of Data Journalism. It's quite early in the morning, so it's nice to see so many of you here with us today. We've had the past editions of the school have seen hundreds of journalists sign up. I think we had 200 journalists sign up for the first edition 2 years ago, and more than 300 sign up for last year's edition. So it's great to see that there is still interest and see that so many of you are here with us. As Wilfried mentioned, I am leading data journalism activities at the European Journalism Center, and I was also one of the coordinators for the first 2 editions of the school, which is why I am introducing it. So to tell you a few words about this event, the School of Data Journalism is a collaboration between 3 organizations: the Open Knowledge Foundation, the European Journalism Center, and the International Journalism Festival. And we'd like to especially thank the International Journalism Festival this year, and Chris just walked into the room, one of the founders of the festival, for hosting us and for supporting this event, especially given the difficulties that they've had last year in making sure that this event happens. So what does this mean for participants, for all you here today? This event brings together hundreds of journalists, and we think this is the biggest data journalism training event in Europe. So it's the best opportunity that you have to meet and learn together with fellow journalists with timilar interests about the latest developments in the field, about the challenges that everyone encounters, but also about new tools and techniques. And we have a program packed with panel discussions and hands-on sessions where you can learn everything from spreadsheets to social media data to investigating crime and corruption, and even collecting your own data with aerial photography. So you'll actually learn how to work with a kite this year, so there's also some fun involved. Before we move into the panel, I'd like to introduce the new coordinators. So this year, the school has 2 new coordinators, and if you signed up for it, you already received some emails from them. These are Antoine Laurent, who is a senior project manager at the EJC. Antoine, maybe you can show yourself to the room, because you'll be seeing Antoine in all the events. Yeah, and the coordinator on the side of the Open Knowledge Foundation is Milena Marin, who is School of Data project manager. So both of them worked hard to bring us all here, and you'll be seeing them in all the events. So if you'll ever have a question, just go and speak to them. I'll now hand over to Milena and Antoine to quickly give you a bit of the logistics for this event, and then we'll get started with the first panel.
Hello, everybody. It's a real honor to be here today, to see so many of you. It's an honor to coordinate this event on behalf of Open Knowledge Foundation and School of Data. It's been a long collaboration. As Liliana said, we've been working together for the past 3 years, every year organizing the School of Data Journalism. I think this year we maybe overdid it a bit. We got ourselves in a bit of trouble by organizing maybe too many workshops. So I think last year we had 4 workshops, and we couldn't really select the best one, so we kind of selected everyone. So we'll have 10 workshops, as Liliana said, 4 panel discussions. In the morning, starting 9 a.m. from now till Sunday, we'll have a panel discussion here in this room. And then in the afternoon, we'll move to Hotel Sangalo, where we'll have the workshops. The workshops are, as much as possible, hands-on. We expect quite a lot of people to participate. Bring your laptops. You'll receive an email every evening telling what you need to download, what data, what software we'll use the next day. So pay attention to these emails. We'll let you know what's happening and how you can prepare. We expect internet to be not very reliable, so that's why we really ask you to do these things, to download the data we'll work on, and so on. Today, I think we don't have any special requirements. We'll have some workshops with Steve Doig, with Annabelle Church, and with Mariana Santos. We'll be looking already at how to build a data journalism story, how to use maps, and how to do interactive storytelling. So yeah, we're very excited, very passionate about data journalism, very happy to see all of you here. And maybe just in closing, I want to say a couple of words about the Open Knowledge Foundation. For those of you who don't know us, we're a network of global people working, being passionate about data. We do advocacy, we do trainings, we use technology, and we really try to unlock information and make it usable and accessible for everybody. We do a lot of advocacy, as I said, to open up data and information around the world, and we monitor the level of openness. We have an index that looks at how open different countries are, what data sets they release, and so on. We do trainings through the School of Data project that I lead. We work with journalists and activists and really try to teach them the skills they need to be effective in using data. And also we do some services for governments. We help them release data. We build technology tools for them to manage open data and so on. So we'll be here all the time, as Liliana said, and we'll be really happy to answer any questions and talk to you and discover opportunities to collaborate further. Antoine, would you like to say a couple of words about what's happening these days? No. So we'll see